episode of No Free Lunch, Economics for a Fallen World. In prior episodes, we have spoken about demand and supply, and now we're ready to put those together. And as you can see, the graph here has both supply and demand curves. So, Dr. Heyman, what is equilibrium? Explain that term.
Well, equilibrium is really just a conceptual tool that we think of in economics, because it's this tendency, as I've kind of underlined in our lineup here on the chart, it's a tendency that the markets work towards. And, the great neoclassical economist, Bauer, was once talked about, and Walras, once talked about the market groping towards this equilibrium. It's the searching. We don't have groping is the best English word because they didn't really have a good word to describe. Markets are always on the move is the bottom line. So, but yet we've got this conceptual tool, and it's probably helpful for me to just stand and talk to it. So when you have any sort of price in the market, notice that there's only one price where supply and demand are going to intersect. That's what we call is equilibrium. And the reason why we call this an equilibrium is precisely because at that point, everybody that wants to sell on the supply curve can sell all they want to sell at that price. Everybody that wants to buy at that price can buy at that price. And so, as I like to say, X marks the spot, and that's kind of our equilibrium position. But equilibrium is this fluid situation. Markets are always changing. We've talked last time, and we'll talk again a little bit about how demand can change in a subsequent video. But these things change, and that moves. And how does the process work? And what happens is, if we have the market reflecting a price that is not consistent with what we have here as P star, anywhere else, there are going to be forces by the price system communicating information both to entrepreneurs that are providing the goods and service on the supply side, as well as the demand side will get the right signal to behave in the right way. So let's say that you're up here. Notice these errors are going down. That would be with any price greater than what this equilibrium price is. Well, if we look at our supply curve, the quantity supplied at a higher price would be much greater on the quantity line than the quantity that would be demanded. There's going to be a whole lot more supplied than there is demanded. And you know what's going to happen. The store shelves are overflowing with all these goods and services. And Amazon can't get rid of it. So their warehouses are filling up. What is going to be the tendency when they get this market signal, because that's what's going on, the price is acting as a communication signal as to true consumer preferences. What's going to happen? Dr. Guernsey, what happens when there's too much stuff on the shelf? What do you think is going to happen?
They need to reduce the price to sell
They're going to put something going on sale quick, and so we're going to have a sale. And so that's going to lower the price. The suppliers will lower that price. And as we talked earlier, there will be some marginal demander that will find as they lower the price, well, hey, now I'm willing to buy. And it just keeps going until we get to that equilibrium price. If they went too far and you're now down here, the reverse would be true. For whatever reason, the price is incorrect. Everybody wants one. Everybody's got to have this latest good and service, and the shelves are empty, and they can't get enough of this good and service. So stores are going to start holding back for premiums. I mean, if you go buy, when the latest new car comes that's maybe a special edition, sometimes they'll even sell that for over sticker price. That's kind of an example of how it works. They'll hold back. They just won't want to sell that one because it draws people in the dealership. And even if the merchants don't, you may say, well, that doesn't happen. It's just going to be empty shelves. Well, a secondary market will emerge. People will pay more for what they can't buy in the store, and eventually that bids the process out, and the prices will tend to rise to meet the demand. That encourages additional supply to be forthcoming. And as the price increases, some of these marginal demanders down here will drop off and will no longer. So the end result is everybody that wants to be able to buy at that price is able to, and those that want to sell at that price are able to. That's why we call this an equilibrium. It's the only stable position.
So this is a model.
It is a model.
It's a simplification of real world, if you will. You didn't say these words. Is this a static model or a dynamic model?
This is that's an interesting way to phrase it, because it's a little bit static and it's a little bit dynamic. In the way that we use this basic model, it's effectively what we call comparative statics, which means we'll allow one thing to change at a time. It's not really dynamic in having the true sense of, hey, demand can be changed, supply. We'll look at one thing changing once at a time, and throughout this course we'll be doing that. But it really is the framework that we use in this textbook, the neoclassical framework, is basically a static framework while allowing one thing to change, and then we can conceptualize, because it is a conceptual tool. Because the real market, it's going really fast. All the time, an entrepreneur is thinking of something else to do, and people's tastes and preferences are changing. All those things are changing all the time.
So last question, according to this model, are we always in equilibrium or perhaps never? And how do we know?
It really depends on how you frame this. If we think at any moment in time, you could make the case that we're always in equilibrium at that moment in time. But we could also say, because people are always adapting and changing their preferences, maybe we never get it. I tend to think myself personally, and many economists like me, a little bit differently about equilibrium as being this tendency such that you're always in this tendency and you're moving this direction. It's so dynamic. And when people are doing the best they can, then you're kind of the equilibrium, because that's the real world we live in. But for a conceptual tool of this, no, we're not in equilibrium. We're always moving. But again, this is just a conceptual tool.
Okay, great. Thanks for joining us today to talk a little bit about equilibrium, supply and demand. I'm sure we'll hear more about that in future episodes. That's it for now on No Free Lunch, Economics for a Fallen World.